Gregg Braden's speech highlights the power of human emotion and belief in shaping both our personal lives and the world. He challenges two outdated scientific assumptions, that space is empty and that our thoughts and feelings don't affect the external world. Drawing on quantum experiments and real-life examples, he shows how emotions can influence physical matter, like DNA, and even help heal the body. Braden urges us to embrace our role as co-creators of reality, using positive emotions like gratitude and compassion to create the outcomes we desire. He emphasizes that the crisis we face today can't be solved with old ways of thinking. We need to recognize the power within ourselves and actively shape a better future. I hope you enjoyed this special presentation from Gregg Braden, and special thanks to our partner Liz Dawn from Celebrate Your Life for allowing us to use it exclusively on our YouTube channel. Believe.
In the year 2003, a group of scientists and engineers convened a conference. And it was a conference, the first of its kind. It was designed to evaluate the situation on planet Earth, to see what it is that's happening here. Where does our attention need to be focused? Where can we do things better, and where have we done things wrong? The result of this conference, the implications are absolutely staggering. They actually published the results in Scientific American in a special issue, a special edition called Crossroads Planet Earth. And maybe you saw that just a couple of years ago. And what these scientists did, and engineers and social architects, they identified 5 scenarios. Any one of these 5 scenarios, if they were to go to completion, would end civilization as we know it and forever change the planet, whether we're here or not, would change the planet as we know it today. And what makes this such a pivotal time in the history of our civilization and of the planet is that all 5 of the scenarios are happening at the same time, and they're all happening right now. And they all range from the very real possibility of a global war, unlike anything we've ever experienced before, and the technology underlying that war, nuclear-based technology. They talked about the 30 new viruses that have just appeared seemingly out of nowhere in the last 12 years, viruses that appear to be immune to any technology that we have today. Deadly viruses in different parts of the world, many of them are in Africa. And, of course, abrupt climate change. All of these things were the topic of what this conference was all about. And the bottom line was the scientists said we've got to begin looking at ourselves and our world differently. They said we've got to think outside the box. We've got to think in ways that we've never thought before. And the reason is because it's the old thinking that has led to many of the problems that we're finding today. And this is what brings us into this room, because those ideas, the ideas that are underlying many of the problems that we find in our world today, are based on scientific assumptions, and those assumptions are false. 2 of them are absolutely false. However, they have been the bottom line for our science for over 100 years. So what I'd like to do is identify these. I'm going to share with you the new research that shows why these assumptions are absolutely false. We're going to go through some very fun experiments. And then we're going to see a real-time application of how our lives could be different if these assumptions that we now know are false, if we were to embrace the truth of what is actually happening in our lives. One of the assumptions is that scientists have believed, and that the textbooks that you're using today, your children are using today, have said that the space that's in between the things in life is empty. The space between you and me, and the space when you look at the nucleus of an atom and that first electron, the space between stars and galaxies, they said that space is empty. And because they have believed it's empty, science has been based on the idea that everything is separate from everything else, and that what happens in one place has no effect on what's happening anywhere else, and that you and I have very little effect on the world beyond our bodies. What we know is that is a false assumption, and you're going to see why. You don't have to take my word for it. Number 2, that our inner experiences of thought, feeling, emotion, and belief have no effect on our outer world. That when we have the experiences, the powerful experiences of emotion in our bodies, that there is nothing happening beyond our bodies in the world. I'm going to tell you, nothing could be further from the truth. Ancient traditions tell us in no uncertain terms that you and I have come into this world, and from the moment we take our first breath, every one of us embodies what they call the single most powerful force in the universe. And that's the force for you and I to create in physical matter what we feel in our hearts and imagine in our minds. The ability to create in physical matter what we imagine in our minds and feel in our hearts. How many of you feel like there's a power within you that has never really been fully tapped? Do you feel that? Okay, so almost everyone in the room has raised your hands. If you feel that power's there, why haven't you used it? You feel there's a power there, why haven't you used it? This is where this gets really, really interesting. Because what we're about to do in here is called the great secret that everybody knows except us in our culture. Because in our Western culture, what we're about to do, the information that tells us about this power in our lives and our bodies, this information was edited from our most cherished spiritual tradition 1,700 years ago. In the 4th century, we know at least 45 books were edited from what became our biblical text. And we know that because we've recovered them in the Dead Sea Scrolls, the Nag Hammadi Library, the Coptic Library. So we know this information was lost because we have found it in recently recovered texts and documents. And what's so interesting is the very books that were edited and removed from our spiritual traditions are the books that give the instructions that tell us about this power in our lives, to heal our bodies and to create peace in our families and our world. I'm going to talk about this for just a moment. Do you know that every cell in your body, there's no reason, absolutely no reason under God's green earth why you and I should not live on this earth at least 140 to 200 years is what scientists are saying right now. At least 140 to 200 years. But in our culture, we seem to die between 70 and 100 years. Why is that? Every cell in our body, every cell has the ability to repair itself, even in organs and tissues that we were once told could not repair themselves. Spinal cord tissue can repair itself. Brain tissue can repair itself. Your heart can grow new cells. And whether you believe this or not, I'm just going to tell you a simple fact right now. Every one of you in this room has stem cells in your body right now, adult stem cells that are waiting for the instructions from you to tell them what to do and how to heal your body and give you a better life. The question is, do we know the language that those cells recognize? Do we know that language? And that's the information that was lost. How to speak to the stuff our bodies and our world are made of in a language that stuff recognizes. How to heal our bodies, create peace in our world, and all the other things in between, like perfect relationships and abundance and all the things that people like to talk about. As different as they sound from one another, they're all part of the same principle, and that's what we're going to explore in here today. 90% of the universe contains empty space, is what scientists have told us until recently, and that our inner experiences, thought, feeling, emotion, belief have no effect on our outer world. We're going to start today by just saying it's absolutely false. And when we really, really begin to get the implication of what this means, it'll change civilization. Absolutely. When the average person on the street really begins to understand what the technical journals are saying, because they're telling us this, they're just telling us in really technical information. It's kind of like the early church used to do everything in Latin, so you'd feel separate from everything else. You wouldn't understand it. And you needed someone to interpret it for you. The same thing is happening in science today. But this is so easy, and it's so basic, and most of you probably already know it. However, there's something about us humans in that we need the validation of an external text or someone that we believe is a powerful wisdom keeper to validate these principles for us. So, the new discoveries, the bottom line, here's where we're going to go. We're going to find that there's an intelligent field of energy that fills that empty space. It's not empty as all. That our bodies and our world literally materialize from what's in that field, and that the power of human emotion and human belief translate quantum possibilities. Whatever you can imagine in your mind is a quantum possibility. Everything from the lightest of the light to the darkest of the dark, from the greatest suffering to the greatest joy, from your perfect relationship to your worst relationship. If you can imagine it in your mind, you can make it real in your world, and we do this all the time. Sometimes we know that we're doing it, sometimes we don't. Emotion and belief are the translators for that. And to begin our day, I'm going to begin with a story. I wanted you to have an experience in here before we even begin the science. So I'm going to share this story with you. It's a true story. Now, this is a true story, and it's a really, really powerful story, and I want to share it with you today. It's a story of a young Jewish boy. His name was Joey. When Joey turned 16 years old, it's like a little switch went off inside of his body. And suddenly he began to question everything that he'd ever been taught about his tradition. 5,000 years of Jewish heritage behind him. And as his parents tried to instill that within him, he questioned it. And he asked his father, for years, he asked his father, why should I accept these things blindly until I know them to be true in my life? Well, when he turned 19 years old, he left home to find in his world the truth of the things that he was being taught. And his father was personally offended. His father said, if you leave this home, if you turn your back on my teachings, if you turn your back on everything that your mother and I have tried to share with you, if you turn your back on 5,000 years of Jewish heritage, he said, you have no father. I am your father no more. And Joey said, I've got to do this. And he left. And it was the last time he and his father ever spoke again. Well, a year later, Joey was in a little cafe in Europe. And you never know who's going to walk into those little cafes while you're there. Because he was sitting at this cafe and a friend of his came in that he had not seen since he'd left his home. And the first thing his friend said to Joey, he said, Joey, I was so sorry to hear about the death of your father. And it was the first time Joey knew that his father had died. He immediately came back home. And he began speaking with the neighbors, and he began speaking with his father's co-workers. And what he found is rather than his father turning his back on him, just the opposite had happened. His father had spoken about him incessantly since he'd been gone, about how proud he was of his son Joey, who had the courage to question the tradition and to go in the world and find that truth. And all of this led Joey back into the fold of the Jewish tradition, and he found himself on a pilgrimage to the old city in Jerusalem, to the West Wall. And the practice, how many of you have been to the Western Wall, by the way? So you've seen this happen before. The practice is to write a prayer, to inscribe a prayer to God on either a piece of paper or a cloth, and then to roll that piece of paper, that cloth up. And this very ancient wall is made of limestone bricks that are so old the mortar has fallen out from in between the bricks, leaving spaces and gaps. And what the practice is to take those prayers and to place them in the wall in those gaps. Here's a picture of a soldier doing precisely this. So you can see these are prayers the soldier is actually placing his own prayers into the wall. Here's others that have been here for a long time. So this is what Joey found himself doing. He wrote a prayer to his father, and he wrote a prayer to God. And he rolled it up, and he was pacing back and forth in front of the wall, looking for just the right place where he would leave his prayer. And suddenly something very unexpected happened. Because as he passed one place in the wall, his eye caught a niche, and he said, that's where I'm going to leave my prayer. He reached up to place his prayer in that space, and another prayer popped out and dropped at his feet. You know where the story's going, don't you? He reached down to pick up this prayer, and as he was opening it up, he immediately recognized the handwriting. And it was his father's prayer that his father had placed in there before he died. He had journeyed to precisely the same place, found precisely the same niche in the wall, and he'd written a prayer to God before he died and asked God for forgiveness for turning his back on his son and how much he actually loved his son. Now, I'm going to stop the story right there just for a minute. I'm going to ask you a question. When I said that, could you feel that feeling? Did you feel a little feeling in your body? What'd you feel? What was that? Chills, energy? The whole point is, if I had walked into this room and said to you, make that feeling happen, you may have been hard-pressed to do it because you may not have found a reason to do that. But when you heard that piece of the story, something happened inside of you, at least some of you, and that something bypassed your mind. It came from your heart because you felt that resonance with whatever the story was telling you. And that something, whatever that was to you, that something is a language. That feeling that you had is a language, and you're going to see in just a few moments, it's the language that speaks to the quantum stuff our world is made of and that your body is made of. The quantum essence of our world doesn't understand our verbal language. So we say, please, dear God, let there be healing in the body of my loved ones, or let this situation resolve itself. The words aren't making the difference. It's the feeling underlying the words. You may be vocalizing a feeling, But the bottom line is that the feeling is where the energy is happening. And that is what was lost in our tradition 1,700 years ago, because we lost the texts that tell us that feeling is the prayer and that feeling is the language. So what I'd like to do is talk about this field of energy. We're going to explore what it is that's in the emptiness between things and how this power within our bodies accesses, how it touches that stuff. We're going to understand how it works, and we'll begin to speak the language that it recognizes. So, we're going to begin with a question. How much power? How much power do we really have to change our world, to change our lives, to change our bodies? Do you think we're powerless in this world, or do you believe that we are actually empowered to make these kinds of changes? Do you think that's possible? How many feel like something big is happening in the world right now? Bigger than Iraq, bigger than George Bush? We've just come back from a 6-week tour in Europe, and everyone over there knows it's bigger than George Bush and knows it's bigger than Iraq. There is something happening right now. Those scientists that I just shared the story about in the conference that was held in 2003, at the end of that conference, what they said was this. They said of all the dangers and all the threats that they identified, they said we've got about 5 to 8 years to figure this out. And they said if we don't figure it out within 5 to 8 years, nothing else is probably going to make much difference. And that's why meetings like this are so powerful and so important. Because we're going to offer a new way, a different way, a very valid way of thinking about ourselves and our world. And when we come together in groups like this to do precisely that, and then we carry that back into our lives, that's where the change really begins. How much power do we really have to change our world, our lives, our bodies? What we're really asking is the question, who are we? And this is the question that science is struggling to answer, and there are 2 schools of thought. When I was in school, and if you're in school or your kids are in school now, 2 schools of thought that offer different insights into who we are in this world. Are we passive observers, or are we powerful creators, as our most cherished spiritual traditions have always suggested? Well, this is interesting because Albert Einstein, I have great admiration for Albert Einstein, but he was of the school of thought that you and I actually have very little power in this world. What he said is this is a quote. He said, "We live in a world which exists independently of us human beings, which stands before us like a great eternal riddle, at least partially accessible to our inspection and thinking." So what he's saying is, the world has been here for a long time. We've come along relatively recently. That we aren't going to have much effect in our lives. And after we're gone, the universe isn't even going to know that we were here. We're insignificant specks. That's what I was taught when I was in school. Doesn't that make you feel good when you go home at night? You're just an insignificant speck of cosmic dust. Now, the other school of thought, this is interesting because a colleague of Einstein's who studied with him in his time is still with us today. His name is Professor John Wheeler, Princeton University. Anyone here study with John Wheeler? I've actually had some of his students in our workshops. And when I share one of Wheeler's quotes, his students say, yes, John Wheeler said that, and then he said this, and they give me the rest of the story. So it's been really interesting. Look at what John Wheeler says. He studied with Einstein. They had the same data, the same information. They had the same background, and they had very, very different conclusions. John Wheeler says we couldn't even imagine a universe that did not contain us because, he said, it's because of us, because of our interaction with the universe, that the universe is changing and building itself as it goes. He's saying that we're directly responsible for things that are happening in this universe right now. He actually says we're part of a universe that's not finished. He said it's a work in progress. He said that we're little patches of the universe looking at itself, building itself in what he calls a participatory universe. Now, I love that word, participatory. It implies that we're not manipulating our universe and we're not necessarily controlling it and we're not imposing our will on the universe, that somehow we are sharing in the outcome of our time in history. Participatory universe. This is a powerful statement. I want to talk about this just for a minute. Let me ask you a question. How many of you lie in bed sleeplessly, tossing and turning at night, wondering in your mind the deepest of questions, why haven't scientists found the edge of the universe yet? Am I the only one? Okay, there's a couple others. Okay, how about this? How many of you lie awake in bed at night, tossing and turning, sleepless night after night because you're wondering why we haven't found the smallest particle of matter? Have you wondered about that? Same people, right? Well, we're a lot of fun, aren't we? John Wheeler gives us the answer to why we will probably never find the edge of the universe and why we'll probably never find the smallest particle of matter. Because what John Wheeler is saying is that consciousness itself is a force of creation, that consciousness is creating. Scientists have spent billions of dollars building these big machines called cyclotrons. They'll take a little quantum particle of matter and they'll start spinning that thing around. They'll accelerate it until it's almost going the speed of light, and then they'll smash it into another particle, into a bajillion pieces, thinking that somewhere in those bajillion pieces they're going to find the ultimate smallest particle. And every time they think they found it and they look a little closer, what happens? There's something else there. Okay, the Hubble telescope. I worked for the company that built part of the Hubble telescope. Spent billions of dollars putting this thing in space. It's done a great job looking at the edge of the universe. And every time that telescope says, I think we found the boundary between our universe and the nothing, they look a little closer, and what happens? Something else is there. John Wheeler is telling us why we'll probably never find the edge of the universe or the smallest particle. Consciousness is a force of creation unto itself. Consciousness creates. Every time we look, every time we peer into our universe, into our world, into your life, with the expectation that something will be there or something is going to happen, consciousness will put something there to meet that expectation. What does that mean to you? Think about that. This is powerful, powerful stuff. What does it mean to you if you are conditioned? Let's just get right down to the nitty-gritty of everyday life. What's it mean when you're conditioned through your medical practitioners and through television ads to step into the shower 2 or 3 or 4 times a week and look at your body and look for something to be wrong with your body? And you look and say, oh, is this the day I'm going to find that lump that's not supposed to be there, or that discoloration that shouldn't be there? And when it's not there, you say, well, I'm glad it's not here today. I hope it's not there tomorrow. Now, I'm not saying not to look, but it's the consciousness that's doing the looking. I mean, what if you get in the shower and you say, man, what a beautiful body. Look at this great body. It works really well. Had it for a while. Reasonably happy with it. And give thanks for the things that work well. Can you see? This is a really subtle, it's a powerful difference. If you look with the expectation that something is going to be wrong with your body, and you do it time after time again, what's going to happen eventually? You're going to find something wrong with your body. The new science of epigenetics is telling us that's true. That human belief and human emotion actually change the DNA in our bodies to match the expectations. And that is one of the false assumptions of science today. It's messing everything up. I mean, if you're in school right now, it's messing everything up. Participatory universe. 1944, the father of quantum theory, Max Planck, he made a very powerful statement. I'm going to read this to you so you have it on the tape. Max Planck said, quote, "Is a man who's devoted his whole life to the most clear-headed science, to the study of matter, I can tell you as a result of my research about the atoms this much." He said, matter doesn't even exist, at least not the way we think it does. He said, there is no matter as such. The stuff of your body and the stuff of our world doesn't exist, at least the way we think it exists. Now look at what he said again. 1944. He went on to say that what we see as matter originates and exists only by virtue of a force. And he said, we must assume behind this force the existence of a conscious and intelligent mind. This mind is the matrix of all matter, the matrix of all matter. And it was based on Max Planck's work that the movie series The Matrix was developed. This is where it came from. It's saying that underneath the reality, the physical reality that we're so accustomed to seeing, there's another reality that you can't see. But it's there. And it's what fills in the empty space that really isn't empty at all. So Planck is saying it's there, and this is what quantum theory is all about. What that information means to our lives, what it means to our bodies. All of this is leading to a new science and a new spirituality that doesn't even have a name yet. And it's probably good because as soon as they put a name on it, they're going to have a bunch of rules around it. Then they'll have people to interpret it for us, and we're going to feel left out again. It'll become a religion. So I don't know where that came from. I never said that before, but it just happened. I'm channeling somebody in the next room, I guess. A new science, a new spirituality. It's based on human emotion and human belief. And I'm going to go through now. I want to share with you 3 very powerful representative experiments. There are lots of experiments out there. They're being published in the open journals, but they're very technical in nature. And I've chosen 3 to illustrate this point. There are others, so if I didn't choose your favorite experiment, please don't be disappointed. And all this is on the website under references. You don't have to write this down if you want to look at the website. So what I'd like to do is share 3 experiments with you that show, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that tell us that there's something in that empty space, number 1, that human DNA directly affects what's in that empty space, number 2, and number 3, that human emotion changes the DNA that's changing what's in the empty space. Does that make sense? I'm telling you, I'm saying it now. This is where we're going. I'm going to share the experiments. And after that, rather than ask you to take my word for it, I'm going to share with you a video example where we'll get to see what in the past has been called a miracle. But it's only a miracle until we understand the principles that we're talking about. And it's no longer a miracle. It becomes something else. And that'll take us through the end of our time together today. So I'm going to share these 3 experiments. Human emotion, human belief is a code. What you feel in your heart literally is a code that translates the invisible energy that Max Planck calls the matrix, the possibilities of what can be. It translates those possibilities into the visible matter of our world. What scientists are telling us today is that you and I, what we see as our visible world, is a little tip of the iceberg of a much greater reality that we simply cannot see with our eyes, although we're a part of it. You all have heard that, haven't you? In that reality, in that quantum soup of all possibilities, everything already exists. Everything you could ever imagine. From the lightest of the light to the darkest of the dark. Your greatest suffering, your greatest healing. You're already healed in that field. Your healing has already happened. Your perfect relationship is already there. Your abundance, your joy, your success. And the opposite of all those things, your lack, your disease. Every disastrous relationship you could ever imagine. All of your high school sweethearts that you didn't marry, you did marry in that field somewhere. Does that make you want to go there really fast? I'm saying that because I have a class reunion coming up here. We were just talking about it earlier. Class reunion. Now, there's a whole topic. That could be a whole... Okay, a new book, Quantum Class Reunion. What do you think? So what we do, now this is very powerful. Here is what quantum physicists are beginning to find in the laboratory, and here's what the ancients say. You and I visualize in our mind the possibilities. Okay, in that quantum soup, the energy is in motion. It is dynamic. It's in constant flux. And when we imagine in our mind the healing of our loved ones, or that perfect relationship, what that imagining does is it locks one of those possibilities into place. It's no longer now in motion. You lock it into place. You isolate that possibility, but that's not enough. And this is where a lot of people stop. They think if they simply imagine a possibility or visualize a possibility, that somehow it's going to magically come into our world. And when it doesn't happen, they lose faith and they become disappointed. And they say, my prayers aren't working. We isolate that possibility, and the great secret of the ancient traditions tells us that to bring that possibility into our world, we've got to breathe the power of emotion, of human emotion, into that possibility. Our love for that possibility or our fear of that possibility. And what's interesting is sometimes we lock those into place unconsciously. We don't even know we're doing it. We don't know that we have unconsciously locked into place our greatest fears. And that fear literally brings it into the reality of our world. But as we begin to understand how this principle works, it's really easy to change it. So what we do is we imagine the possibilities, and through the power of human emotion, we breathe life into those possibilities. And that quantum essence becomes the physical atoms of our world. The physical atoms of our world. And you're going to see an example of that in just a little while, and it'll take all of this right out of the realm of academics. First, I'd like to share with you 3 experiments. How many in here don't like science? How many never liked science when you were in school? Well, thank you for your honesty. This is fun science, though, but please don't be deceived by the simplicity of the experiments. These are very, very powerful experiments. The first one was performed at the University of Geneva in Switzerland, July 25th, 1997. It was reported over 3,400 journalists, educators, scientists, engineers in more than 40 countries should have made the cover of major publications. It didn't. And I think I know why. It was so technical. But what they did was this. The scientists took a particle, a quantum particle, of the stuff our world is made of, a photon. When you see the word photon, think physical reality. This is what atoms are made of. Atoms are made of little packets of light called photons. So what these guys are doing is they're messing with the stuff our world is made of, okay? They took a quantum particle, a photon, and they wanted 2 identical particles. So they would know all the properties of both of them. So they took this one and they broke it into 2 identical twins. So now we've got photon 1, photon 2. And they placed them in a special device that would allow each photon to be fired from its location here to a target 7 miles away. So this photon goes down this path to a target 7 miles this direction, and this photon goes down this path to a target 7 miles in that direction. So when they both reach their targets, they're 14 miles apart. You okay with that? So here they go. Boom. They're going to go to their targets. Now they can begin the experiments. And what they found is this. They found that with these 2 photons, when they would begin to do something to one of these, they would disturb it. The word is called tickling. So they would tickle one of these photons. They might change its charge from a plus to a minus, or they might force it to rotate a different direction, or they might force it to travel on a path going one direction or a path another direction. Didn't make any difference. Whatever they did here to this photon, the other photon acted like it was the one having the experience, even though no one was doing anything to that photon. And what really messed up all the theories, they said, well, we can explain that, until they found that sometimes the second photon was having its experiences before the first one even had its experiences. And the question is why? What is it that's happening? How are these 2 photons in communication with one another? They act like they're still connected. We're going to come back to that experiment later on, but I'm going to stop it right here, because what we have done right now, the fact that the 2 are sharing experiences is what I wanted you to see from this. As if they're still connected, even though they're not. The term in physics is called entanglement. How many have heard of entanglement? I like that term. When I have a disagreement with someone else, I can say, we are quantumly entangled right now. And if that doesn't end the whole thing, then I know it's just time probably to walk away. The term used is entanglement. So the summary of this experiment, what I want you to see from this is, and this is really important, that particles, once physically joined, even though they become separate physically, appear to remain linked in energy, energetically. Okay? Does that make sense to you? Well, now you have to ask me why you care. Somebody say, why do I care? I'm glad you asked me that, so now I can go to the next slide. And if you're taking notes, this is so important, I wrote important up there. So you can write important. Here's the reason why. It implies that once matter is physically connected, it's always connected no matter where it is. This is an image that was taken of the Hubble telescope. And where you see these 2 arrows is believed to be the center of the universe where everything began. What do physicists call the moment in time that they believe everything began? The entire universe. What do they now call that? The Big Bang. I was just in Europe. We were touring I was touring with a dear friend, Dr. Bruce Lipton, through Europe, and we were following the Rolling Stones tour, which is now called the Bigger Bang. So we never got to meet them, but we were right behind them in every city we went to. The Big Bang. I have to tell you, I just have to stop and tell you, when I was researching this for the book, I did a little research, side research. I want to know where that name came from. And what I found was it was a male physicist that coined the term the Big Bang in 1951 for the beginning of the entire universe. And I asked my female physicist friends, I said, if you had been the one that discovered this, would you have called the Big Bang? And they said, not in a million years. They said, we would never call the beginning of everything in the universe the Big Bang. And I said, well, what would you call it? And they said, well, we would have called it something like the first breath of the new dawn, of the new beginning, of whatever it is. But we got a guy out there calling it the Big Bang, so the Big Bang is where everything began. Here's what scientists say to us today. Then they say the universe is continuing to expand from this point right here. But if we could go back far enough in time, to the very beginning, right after the Big Bang, what would it look like? I worked really hard to get this slide for you. A long time ago, far, far away. If we could reach into the many light years in diameter of our universe today and gather all the particles from all of the stars and all of the galaxies and all of the beings, take out the empty space in between and bring those particles back to a moment in time, scientists tell us that shortly after the Big Bang, our universe looked like this. If you can't see it, there it is. They say that the entire universe was compressed into a ball of matter about the size of a single green pea. And they say that P was about 18 billion million degrees Fahrenheit. And I said, come on, you guys, how do you know it was 18 billion million degrees Fahrenheit? They said, okay, we don't, but it was hot. It was really hot in the very beginning. So it was hot when everything was together. We got a Big Bang. And then suddenly everything began to expand from this point of singularity. Everything began to expand, and it continues to expand today as far as we know. Now, this is important because it implies that as distant as all of the particles are from one another right now, there was a point where everything was once connected. And if we were once connected, are we still linked energetically? And I believe that the answer to that is yes. That's what the experiments are showing. I was trained as a scientist in the hard sciences. And throughout my life, I've been told, I live in the native high desert of northern New Mexico, many native traditions there. And for years, I've been told, and I know you have too, you've all heard that we are one, that we're all connected. My heart wants to believe that, but it never really made a lot of sense until I began to see data like this. This, in my man brain, helps me to understand how we can all still be connected. Does it help you at all? Does it make sense? We were all once part. The stuff that your body is made of is stardust. You've all heard that. If you want to know what the aliens look like, look at the person next to you. You're not from around here. None of us are, and neither are our bodies. We're just here for a while. So are we still connected? The answer is absolutely yes. And it's that connection that changes everything. Because if you are part of all that is, it means that you have the ability to influence, not to control, not to manipulate, not to levy or impose your will, but to participate. There are no victims and there are no passive observers. And that changes everything about our civilization and the way we think of ourselves. I'm going to come back to that in just a minute. Right now we'll do experiment number 2. This was done by Russian physicist Vladimir Poponin back in the early 1990s. And I won't read all of the credits, all the references. Again, you can find these all on the website. But the bottom line, what Poponin did was he took all of the air out from inside of a glass tube, creating what he called a vacuum. And already we've got a problem. Because scientists know just because the air is not in here, it's not really empty. There's still something in this tube. And you all are experts on what that something is. You know what's in there? Photons. Little particles of light. Photons are in the tube. So they know that photons are in this tube, and Poponin says, okay, I want to see the distribution. Are they all like piled up in the bottom, or are they sticking to the sides, or are they all hovering in the air? So he built a device that could measure the distribution, and there's no surprise here. This part of the experiment happened before lunch. Okay, before lunch, the world is right, science is good, and everybody's happy. Okay, because here's what he found. That the photons, when they wanted to see what the distribution was, it was absolutely a random distribution. They were all over the place. just as he suspected they would be. Everything's good so far. After lunch, they came back and did another experiment. Well, I think the experiments are interesting. To me, what is really interesting is the thinking that underlies the experiments. Because when scientists begin to ask the kinds of questions that Poponyan is asking, you know we're on the verge of a big change in how we think about our world. Because look at what Poponyan asked. He said, okay, we've got the stuff our world is made of. Again, when you think photons, just think of our physical world. That's what the stage and our bodies and the floor is made of. He said, we've got this tube of random photons here. Look at what he asked. He said, what happens if we put some human DNA in with those photons? What effect would human DNA have on the photons? What he's asking is, what effect does the stuff that you and I are made of have on the stuff the rest of the world is made of?
My name is Liz Dawn, and I'm with Celebrate Your Life Events. And the presentation that you've been listening to was recorded live at one of our Celebrate Your Life conferences. And this program was created exclusively for Evan's audience. And I'm super thrilled to share this information with you. So come check us out. Take a look at all of our retreats and programs and conferences that we have to offer. Click the link below, and hopefully I'll see you in person. All right, now let's get back to the presentation.
Why should it have any effect? There's nothing, absolutely nothing in conventional Western physics that says it's going to have any effect, but they did the experiment. Here's what they found. Put some human DNA in with the photons after lunch, and nobody was prepared for what they saw. Because what they found was this. They found that in the presence of the DNA, the photons changed themselves. They changed the way they were arranged, the structure. The stuff our world is made of is the structure of the photons coming together. In the presence of DNA, the photons were changed. Now, we've been told that this happens in ancient texts and traditions, but to the best of my knowledge, this is the first time it's been documented under laboratory conditions in a controlled, accredited, academic environment. It's called the phantom DNA effect, if you want to Google it. And they call it the phantom DNA effect because even if they take the DNA out, the photons act like the DNA is still there. And now you know why. It becomes ordered. And this is a very, very powerful experiment that says that DNA directly affects the stuff our world is made of. I didn't put them in here, and I was going to skip them in the interest of time, and it's right here in my mind, so now I have to share it with you. Because the lab notes of the scientists tell the whole story. You know, scientists generally, they're a little reserved, and they're usually pretty objective. What Poponyan said in these experiments, he says that the DNA appears to have excited what he calls a new field of energy. Field's probably not new. It's probably been there for a long time. We're just now recognizing it. But then he goes on to say, he says, we are forced. He doesn't say, let me share with you what we found, or it looks like maybe this is what's happening. He says, we are forced to accept the possibility that the DNA is exciting some new field of energy. So they don't even like what they're doing here, but they're forced to accept it because it's what the data showed. So this is number 2, experiment number 2. Doing okay with the experiments? Okay, one more fast one. Experiment number 3. How many of you have a hardbound copy of this experiment on your bedstand for light bedtime reading? Don't you all like to read local and non-local effects of coherent heart frequencies on conformational changes of DNA before bedtime at night? I do. I know what they're saying here. They're really good scientists. I've worked with these people before. It's the Institute of Heart Math in Northern California. Really good work, and there's a lot easier way for them to say what it is that they've said. What they're asking is this. They're asking the question, what effect does human emotion have on the DNA in our bodies? Well, why would it have any effect? I was taught that the DNA is just sitting there in the cell, kind of cranking out the code of life. Not much else to do if you're a DNA. And that nothing really influences that DNA in terms of thought, feeling, emotion, and belief. Well, look what the experiments showed. First of all, in 1993, the Institute of Heart Math published in the Journal of the American Medical Association the fact, and it is a fact now, that there's a field of energy that surrounds every human heart. The field looks like this. It's shaped like a donut. It's called a tube torus. And the field extends between 5 and 8 feet in diameter around every human. Now, I was working with the researchers. I went out to visit them at their facilities. And I said, well, if this field is so powerful and if it's around every human heart, why would that field stop at 5 to 8 feet? It seems to me like it could go on for a long time. And they kind of laughed. They said, well, that's the limitation of our equipment. They said, in reality, this field actually extends and has been documented for distances of many, many miles beyond the place where the physical heart resides. They'll take humans out into the wilderness where there are no other humans present, and they know what the electrical and the magnetic signals of the heart look like when they measure it, and they can pick up and detect those indications miles from where that heart is. So there's a good chance. There's a couple of hundred of us in here right now. You're all within 5 to 8 feet of one another. You're all sharing a heart field. That heart field is not limited to this room. We're affecting all of Chicago right now. So what are we going to do with that? Well, let's see. So they know this field is there. That isn't what's in question. The question they're asking now is, what effect does human emotion in this field have on the shape of the DNA in our cells, on what is called the conformation or the shape? And I want to talk about this just for a minute. When I was in school, I was taught there are about 50 trillion or so cells in our body. Every cell's got some DNA, and the DNA, I was taught, looked pretty much the same. You've all seen the double helix, the model of a double helix. Scientists now have found that is not the case, that the DNA in our cells changes its shape. And when it does, it changes the way you feel and the way you behave and your ability to deal with the world and life. For example, in the presence of DNA that is relaxed, when the two strands are very relaxed, all of the codes on those strands of DNA, it's as if they are enabled to fully operate, to fully express themselves. And in the presence of that kind of DNA, you have tremendously enhanced immune systems. The aging process is slowed down considerably. DHEA levels, the precursor to all the other hormones in your body, are increased over 100% in 6 hours in the presence of a relaxed strand of DNA. But you all already know this. And here's how you know it. I'll just tell you how you know it. Because the kinds of emotions that relax the DNA are what you would call positive emotions. Love, compassion, understanding, forgiveness. How many in this room are in love right now? Who in this room is tremendously in love right this? Oh, what a good audience. I was just in a German audience. I asked that question, and not one person in the room was in love. I said, we got to have a new workshop. Let's do the love workshop in here. Okay, so when you're in love, that first day you fall in love, what happens? All of a sudden you are a superhuman. If this is romantic love, you're a superhuman. You don't have to eat. You don't have to sleep. You're a love machine. You never get sick. And now you know why. Now you know why. Because your DNA, in the presence of those positive emotions, it's allowed its fullest expression. And all you're doing is having the feeling. You don't have to know any of this. What happens in the presence of what you call negative emotions? Anger, hate, jealousy, rage. What do you think happens to the shape of the DNA? If positive emotions allow it to be relaxed, what would negative emotions do? They'll constrict it, and what do you think that does to the expression of that DNA? Well, let me ask this. Do you know people who are chronically angry, chronically depressed? People who have been divorced for 30 years and not got over the divorce. They still wear it on their face. You can see it. What happens to their immune system? Exactly. Your immune system is compromised. What happens to their appetite? What happens to their desire for life? They age faster. Cortisol levels are sky high. We know that these are true intuitively. But what the scientists are doing is asking, can we choose in a moment in time to have the kind of feeling in our heart that makes those changes in our bodies? Well, here's what they found. You've already answered the question. In the presence of gratitude, appreciation, love, and compassion, the DNA became relaxed. The double helices became relaxed. But what I didn't say was this. This is so beautiful. When they allowed the experiments to go on longer than they had originally predicted, when they continued to feel those feelings of love, appreciation, gratitude, forgiveness, the DNA continued to relax and relax and relax to such a degree that it began to unwind itself as if it were replicating a new strand of DNA and giving itself new life. Ooh. And all they were doing was having a feeling. That's all they were doing. You've got a power inside of your body. It's so interesting to me that the power that we're talking about of human emotion and human feeling, it's the power that has been discounted and denied in our Western culture. Men who are believed to be the strongest of the species, we have especially been invited to deny the power of that emotion in our bodies. And ladies, you've been allowed to have it. You've just been told it doesn't mean anything and it doesn't do anything, and for everybody else to ignore it. But it's not true in other cultures, and that's the value of going into some of these monasteries in Egypt and South America, Bolivia, Peru, and Tibet, where they know what this power means in our lives, and they retain the instructions that tell us how to apply this in our life. So, in the presence of the positive emotions, gratitude, appreciation, love, and compassion, the DNA is relaxed. Anger, frustration, jealousy, rage, you already know what's going to happen. It's wound up like a little top. And all those people did was have a feeling, and that's all they did. This is right out of the publication from the Journal of Scientific Exploration, Volume 8, 1994. Quote, it says, individuals trained in feelings of deep love and appreciation were able to intentionally change the shape of the DNA. And now look at this. It said that human emotion produces effects which defy conventional laws of physics. In the presence of you having these coherent, heart-based emotions, you have the power to defy the laws of space and time and physics as we know them today. It means you're not bound by the laws of physics, or if you say it to the positive, it means you're free of the laws of physics. You're free of the laws of physics. You don't have to age the way other people age. You don't have to deteriorate the way other people deteriorate. You don't have to buy in to the diagnosis of a professional medical person that tells you that something in your body is wrong and that you've only got a few days or a few months to live in this world, that your loved one does. None of those things apply in the presence of these kinds of emotions. It's when we discount these experiences is where we become victims and we feel powerless. Have the power to defy the conventional laws of physics. You already know this. How many of you have ever gone to make a phone call to someone that you care about and you pick up the phone and they're already there? You ever done that? That's what's happening right here. That is defying the laws of physics. Obviously, there was a communication between you and the other person, right? In that moment, for you both to be on the phone at the same time, some kind of communication happened. Joey and his father, I'm going to share the rest of the story. Joey and his father had a communication at that wall. If that paper fell out with a prayer the moment that Joey stood in front of it, why would that happen at that very instant if there were not some kind of communication that were happening? In this case, a communication between Joey and the energy of his father that's not even bound by death. His father is in the other world, and something has happened. So would you agree there's a communication there of some kind? The question is, what is the conduit that's carrying the communication? If the space between everything is empty, what is the conduit that's carrying the feeling between you and the person that you're making a phone call to? I try to call my mom about once a week from wherever I am in the world. It doesn't happen all the time, but it's not unusual for me to pick up the phone to call Mom, and she's already there. And she says, Greg, I was just getting ready to call you. And I said, well, you don't have to now because I'm here. Or she says, I called you, but your line was busy. And I said, well, the line was busy because I was calling you. We were off just a fraction of a second. Something is connecting us. And as we really begin to understand what that something is, that is what changes the way we think of ourselves in the world. So these discoveries, and there are many more out there. In a longer program, we could do much more with this, but we're going somewhere with this. The bottom line to these discoveries, number one, emotion changes the DNA. You saw this. You saw this in this last experiment. Positive emotions elongate the DNA, relax it. Negative emotions contract it. So emotion changes the DNA. DNA changes the stuff our world is made of. DNA changes matter. If you take out the middle piece, what we're saying is the emotion changes matter, and that's the great secret of the ancients that's been discounted in the West. That the power of human emotion and very precise kinds of feelings that you carry in your heart change your body and they change your world. So these false assumptions, 90% of the universe, empty space, we know that is absolutely not true. The inner experience of thought, feeling, emotion, and belief have no effect in our outer world. We know those aren't true. Planck's matrix appears to be this conduit, and this is what I wanted to share with you. This is where I wanted to get today. Now, Max Planck's conduit, his matrix is the conduit that allows these things to happen. Now, this is so new. If you go home and Google this, the field, the acceptance of the field is so new in science that scientists have yet to agree on one term for this field. They're still calling it different things. Physicists are giving it a very technical term, making people feel separate from this field. They're calling it the quantum hologram. Some people are simply calling it the field. Lynn McTaggart has the book The Field, and if you work with noetic sciences, they call it the field. Stephen Hawking calls it the mind of God. Max Planck called it the matrix. We're calling it the divine matrix for other reasons. All names for the same field. So I wanted you to see this, so when you see it in the write-ups, you'll know they're all talking about what we did in here today. You okay with that so far? Now, I want to share something really powerful, and I've found our European audiences had not seen what I'm about to share. I've just come back, so you're my first American audience in about 6 weeks. Scientists believe that up to 90% of our universe is what they call empty space. Seems like a really big waste of space. If you saw Carl Sagan's movie Contact, that's what they said. It'd be a real empty waste of space if there weren't other beings out there and if everything was really empty. Well, let me share something with you. 1999, NASA built an observatory. It was called the Chandra X-ray Observatory, and they built it for one reason. What a great mission. The only purpose of this little satellite was to go into space and detect invisible fields of energy in the empty space to see what's really out there. If you've not, how many have never seen what Chandra found? Should have made the cover of USA Today and Time magazine. Do we have time? Do you want to see it? Yeah. Of course we do. That's why we're here. Because this is powerful for your mind, for your left brain to see this. So what I'd like to do first, this is the Hubble image of space, the visible universe that we can see. And those two arrows are pointing to the center of that visible universe. We saw this a few moments ago. Okay, so this is what the naked eye sees. Now, the next image, what I've done is oriented the Chandra data. What Chandra saw is the invisible image, overlaying it exactly the same place at the center of the universe. Looks like the empty space in between here. Look at what Chandra found. Can you see it from over here? Look at what they found. Now look at what you're seeing. Here are all the galaxies. Here's the center of the universe. Those galaxies are still there. Here they are. All over the place. But look, it's not empty space in between. And what I really love about this is when you talk about a matrix, our left brain thinks of like a manly, male, graph paper, square box, left brain, schematically oriented, male-dominated, technological kind of a matrix, right? But the ancient traditions always said, in the traditions, my part of the world, for example, in northern New Mexico, Native Americans say that we lived in 3 previous worlds. The fourth world, when the fourth world began, the world we have now, the very first thing that happened was Spider Grandmother emerged into the fourth world. And what do spiders do? The very first thing she did was she wove the web of creation so that her grandchildren could have their experience in the universe. Or if you're a Buddhist, what do the Buddhist traditions talk about? In the very beginning, the great god Indra, I-N-D-R-A, a place far away, wove the web, or what is called the net of Indra. So this image is very, very different from what you would think of in terms of a left brain image. But this is what the Chandra space satellite is finding in the empty space. It's not empty. There's energy out there. There's a lot of energy out there. And if you didn't know better, in the longer programs, I would superimpose this on a map of the neural network of your brain, and it looks the same. It looks just the same. It's like as above, so below. It's a fractal, if you know about fractals. So, this field, we know the field is real. But that field that Chandra gave us, it was a static field. It was a still photograph. And what I'd like to leave you with is an image of this field being a living, dynamic image. So I put this image up here instead. So you can think about this field as a living body of energy. In the ancient traditions, there is what is called the great spiritual mystery. And I'd like to share this mystery with you in the language of the ancient traditions. And then we're going to look at the same flowchart based on what we saw in the experiments, and then we're going to see a little video in here. The Great Spiritual Mystery says that something we do in our lives triggers a process inside of our bodies, and that process somehow interacts with the forces of creation and affects our physical world. Something that we do in our lives is somehow affecting our physical world. If we do not understand this process of what the experiments are showing us, when this happens, we call it a miracle. And I'm going to share with you what scientists, you'll see this in just a moment, something that scientists have called a miracle. However, it's only a miracle until you understand that you and I in here are speaking to the stuff out there. And then it's no longer a miracle. And if you can do it time and time again, repeatedly and predictably, it's not a miracle, it's a technology. And that is what you're about to see. You're going to see a group of people from another culture who never lost the words in their tradition that reinforce in their mind, in their hearts, the power of their bodies. See, when we lost those words, when we lost the texts that told us how to use this power in our lives, even though we feel that we have it, we began to doubt ourselves. And we doubt today. We still doubt. You all told me you think there's a power in your body that hasn't been fully used. But if I say to you, use it right now. There's even people, even initiates who have trained in the monasteries. They have to overcome this doubt for themselves. And I'll share a very intimate story in just a minute of how that happened for me as well. But this flowchart says that you and I have the ability, if we choose, to initiate a process in our bodies that changes our world. Okay? Now here's the same flowchart based on the experiments that we just saw. Heart-based feeling and emotion changes the DNA of our bodies. It produces quantum effects that extend beyond our bodies. It changes our physical world. And you've said exactly the same thing. Exactly the same thing. In this way, we are the participants that John Wheeler talked about. Now, in longer programs, I would go into a lot more detail about precisely how this works. So in the interest of time today, I've got a film that I'd like to share with you, and I'd like to talk a little bit about that film before I do it. This field of energy, this divine matrix, it's described as a neutral mirror of energy. It simply gives us back in our physical world what it is that we give it to work with. It doesn't necessarily know about right or wrong or good or bad. It is called an unbiased field. The right and the wrong and the good and the bad comes from our judgments of what we give the field to work with. Does that make sense? You okay with that? So the question is, the field is the quantum soup of all possibilities, and the way this soup works is that all we're invited to do is feel as if we already have our heart's desire or our prayers answered, or the healing of our bodies, or the healing of our loved ones, or the peace at our family dinner table, or the peace between nations. We feel as if it's already there, and that is what we give to the field to work with so it can give us back what it is that we're feeling. Does that make sense? Where did we learn to feel the things that we don't have and focus on those? Where did we learn at the end of the month when you look at the checkbook and there's the money for the rent isn't there to focus on how bad that feels and how insignificant we feel about not being able to meet that obligation rather than feeling the feeling of what it feels like to have that rent money right there in the checkbook? Well, I'm mentioning this now because that's what this video is all about. And if you don't understand what it is that I've just said, the video will look like a miracle and it won't make sense. Some of you have seen it before, some have never seen it. I've seen it a lot, and it is a miracle to me every time I see it. It's very empowering. Okay, so let me set this up a little bit. This image that you're about to see, this series, it's filmed in a medicineless hospital in Beijing, China. Now already it sounds like an oxymoron, medicineless hospital. It's the film of a woman who's been diagnosed by Western medical practitioners with a 3-inch diameter bladder cancer, and they say, we cannot help you. It's too advanced. Be comfortable until the end of your days. And she said, thank you very much for your opinion. I'm going to go talk to somebody else. So she found herself at this medicineless clinic. This clinic typically gets the worst of the worst, and people come here as a last resort, and that makes it even more difficult for the practitioners, and it makes it even more pronounced what you're about to see. because these are late-stage, last-resort clinical cases, and they have such success with these, it says that what they're doing works. And it is based on everything that we've just done with the experiments. A lot of the programs I do are not publicly documented on our website, a lot of private programs. And what you're about to see, I did a 3-day intensive for the United States Air Force medical team in San Antonio, Texas. And we saw this video, and for them it was a huge disconnect because there's nothing in their training that allows for what they've seen. It was a great program for me. It's the only time the entire audience has had the same color of shirt every day for 3 whole days. It's a beautiful color of Air Force blue, kind of like that. Okay. So the woman, I'll just answer some of your questions now. She's awake. She's conscious. She believes in the process. There are 3 practitioners who are going to do something, and while they're doing what they were trained to do, we can look inside of her body. We can look at her tumor through the magic of ultrasound, through a sonogram, and we can watch her body respond to what those practitioners are doing real time. So this isn't time-lapse. Like Discovery Channel, you see a flower that opens, it normally takes 7 days, and you see it in 4 seconds. It's not like that. This is real time, and in less than 3 minutes, you're going to see her condition reverse itself. And if you don't understand what it is that's happened, it looks like a miracle. And then I'm going to answer some of the questions. The practitioners are going to chant a word. And what I'm saying to you now is there's no magic in the word. It could be any word. However, this is a word they have agreed among themselves. They agreed that this word would reinforce for them the feeling as if the woman is already healed. And that's the bottom line here. They are not judging the cancer. They're not saying it's right or wrong or good or bad. They're not saying, I hope this works because somebody's taken a picture of it. They're not saying bad cancer, we're going to cut you out or irradiate you. What they're doing is they're acknowledging that the cancer is one quantum possibility of many quantum possibilities because everything is possible. And this is so powerful, what I'm about to share with you. They're not making the tumor go away. What they're doing is feeling the feeling of the woman as if she's already healed, and that is a choice. And in the presence of that choice, in a language the field recognizes, that choice replaces the previous experience, but they're not forcing that tumor to go away. They're not hammering it into submission. Does that make sense? It's very subtle and it's very powerful. And if you're a medical practitioner, I'm going to invite you to watch the registration marks on the sonogram and watch the floor of the bladder. Because if this were being hoaxed, you'd see those change, and they don't change. The only thing that changes is the tissue itself. It's handheld. It's an amateur photograph or film. It's in black and white. Here are 3 practitioners standing behind the woman. You want to see this too. I know you want to come over and see it. The woman is lying here. She's awake. She's conscious. This is the ultrasound technician right here. There's a little wand on her tummy. And now you're going to see an old-fashioned CRT screen. It's a split screen. So on the left-hand side of the screen, they're going to take a snapshot for reference. This is a moment in time here. The black is the emptiness inside the bladder. This is the tumor right here, that lump. And on the right side is the real-time image over here while they're doing the process, so you can compare the two. All they're doing is feeling as if she's already healed. That's all they're doing. And now I'm going to ask you to go ahead and bring the audio up, and let's watch what happens in 2 minutes and 40 seconds. Watch this right here. Sorry, can you see?
您就想一下就彻底散掉。
你放松，放松在这儿。
Now watch the right side.
小了，站住！好，没了，再站去，没了，
I'm going to pause that right there because it happens very, very quickly. Where's the tumor? Okay, now this is what is so interesting. That tumor is still there as the invisible wave form of an energy that has not been made into its material expression. This is the tumor of the visible particle form of the same energy. Remember I said all possibilities already exist. When they are not manifest, they're as invisible waves. When they are manifest, they're physical particles. They're the atoms of the stuff our world is made of. What these practitioners are doing is they're feeling as if the woman is healed, and this is how quickly, and the only reason I'm sharing this with you, is so you can see how quickly the physical world will respond to the language if we understand the language that the divine matrix recognizes. It's less than 3 minutes and that tumor is gone. You want to see that again? You want to see it again? We'll just back this up a few frames. And while it's backing up a few frames, they do this all the time in this part of China. The success rate is 95% after 5 years if they will follow the protocols, the life-affirming protocols of changing diet, breath, nutrition, and belief. If they don't follow those protocols, it may be backing up, and I'm not seeing the backup. Let me hit play and see what happens. So when people go into this clinic, they don't go in to get fixed. They go in to learn a new way to live. That new way includes life-affirming breath, nutrition, movement, gentle life-affirming movements, and belief systems that are very empowering and life-affirming. And while they're in the clinic, it makes sense for them to do this. If they follow the protocols, they have a 95% success rate of brain and bladder tumors after 5 years. So I asked the man I know the man that filmed this. His name is Luke Chen. And I asked Luke the question, I said, could this woman have done this alone? Could she have done it by herself? And he said, in all possibilities, she could have. However, there's something interesting about us humans in that we feel more empowered when we are surrounded by others that believe as we do. Go ahead and bring the audio up, please. Now the tumor's disappearing. Look at the registration marks and look at the floor of the bladder. Nothing's changing here. So they look to make sure it's gone. And they give themselves a hand because they deserve it. And that's that. How do you feel when you see something like that? Thank you. Can you switch it back to the computer, please? It's a powerful video to see. I shared this with a group of scientists in Northern California a few months ago. And the scientists were just beside themselves after seeing this, and they began grabbing at straws, ridiculous straws, trying to explain this. So the first thing they said to me is, we studied healers from all over the world, and there's nothing to the hands-on healing. They said, it doesn't work, it's all a hoax, there's nothing to it. And so I showed them this, and then they were really upset. And they said, well, are you telling us we studied the wrong healers? Should we have been looking at these healers? They said, well, they got together and they said, well, here's what probably happened. They said maybe she was undergoing a barium treatment, and the barium kicked in just while they were doing the ultrasound. And they said, no, here's what happened. The woman was undergoing barium, and the ultrasound made the barium kick in while they were doing this image. And it got so ridiculous. And after a while, I said, I understand what you're doing. I said, but sometimes maybe the most obvious explanation is closest to the most accurate. And they said, no, there's got to be a reason. There's got to be an explanation here. So in this part of China, they do this all the time. The scientists asked me, they were defiant. These scientists were defiant. They said, well, can they do it again? They do this all the time. They've done it for thousands of years. They said, well, can they document it? Can they prove it to us? And I said, they don't have to document it. They're not trying to prove it to you. This is how they live their lives. They can't afford health care over there. Brain and bladder cancers are the two big ones, and this technique is what they're doing. And the only reason I'm sharing this with you, and I wrote about this in the book, The Isaiah Effect, and I wanted it to be credible. So I gave the name and the location of this clinic in Beijing. That book was on a New York Times bestseller list for 16 weeks. I never imagined in a million years that so many people would feel they had to go to that clinic. But they did, and the Chinese government shut it down. That particular clinic, no, this one no longer exists. There are lots of other ones that do. These clinics are everywhere. But this particular one no longer exists. The reason I'm sharing this is because it's brief, and it's potent, and it's graphic. In just a couple of minutes, you can see happening what it is in real time, what we talked about in theory through the experiments. The practitioners were trained to have a feeling in their hearts as if the woman were already healed, as if they were in the presence of a woman fully enabled, fully capacitated, fully healed, not on her way to healing. This field is literal. It's a literal field. Let me ask you a question. It's literal. It will give you exactly what you asked for. Who in this room wants more money? Okay? What happens if you say, I want more money? Okay, if you want, is there an outcome or is it open-ended? It's open-ended. There is no outcome specified. You haven't told how much or when or where. So the field will do exactly what you've just commanded. It will say, okay, I will allow you to want and want and want and want because it works that way. So these practitioners, they didn't say this woman is about to be healed or she's on her way to healing or she's now on a healing path. They came from the place that was already done. Fully enabled, fully capacitated, fully healed, and you saw her body responded. We can do that for one another. This is the power you have over the people in your lives or with the people in your lives. You can hold them in a light. Sometimes they can't even hold themselves in. You can see their perfection. You can see their healing. And you don't have to buy in to what other people, including medical professionals, tell them. Now, I've got a lot of good friends who are in the medical profession. It's an honorable profession. And what I'm saying to you, it's not the fault of medical professionals that they don't understand this because their training didn't prepare them for this kind of information. But what I'm saying to you is that you have that power in your body. Now, I promised you I'd share you a quick story. I've shown this image all over the world, audiences on every continent except Antarctica. It's the only place I haven't been yet. There's no Barnes & Noble in Antarctica. They do have an ATM down there, though, so I know it's only a matter of time before they have a bookstore. I've shared this video, and I've watched that image many, many times over 5 years. In the year 2000, I went to have a physical and had an X-ray, and what do you think was inside of my body? Something that looked just like what you're seeing on that film. And I said, well, of course. I've been watching this thing and feeling it with audiences for 5 years. Why wouldn't it be there? And it was an opportunity for me to put into practice what it is that I've been sharing with audiences for so long. So I took some time. I took a couple of weeks. I went back. I reviewed everything I've learned in the monasteries. I put those things into practice, and there's still that little piece of doubt in our minds, in my mind anyway, that said, let's make sure. So I underwent a medical procedure at the Mayo Clinic in Jacksonville, Florida, and I woke up in the recovery room. I mean, I was still very groggy from this very good anesthetic. And the doctor was in there, and he was looking at me, and he said, what are you doing here? He said, there's nothing there. There never was. He said there was no evidence of any scarring or anything that had ever been there. He said, your body looks just as healthy as the day you were born. Why are you here? In my anesthetized state, I was trying to explain to him about the medicineless hospital in Beijing, China, and the power of human emotion. And I remember him leaving the room. I was in the middle of a sentence. But I thought about this a lot, and this is what I believe has happened, is I had that experience, and I think the reason that I had that, in all honesty, honest to God, is so that I can go anywhere in the world, and I can look any human, eye to eye, heart to heart, face to face, God to God, and I can say to you that I know from my experience that we have this available to us because it's been my experience. And I can say it with conviction because I know it's true and it's worked in my life. And I've had other experiences where similar things have happened, and I've been able to help other people. So the key to what we're doing in here today, this field of energy that we all would like to believe, the only reason that those practitioners, what they felt in their heart could have any effect on that woman's body is there had to be a conduit. There's something that carried that feeling. And you and I are all sharing a heart field right now. We're in one another's field. So my prayer is that as we leave this time together today, is that your left brain, take those experiments if you need them. Because they'll tell you why it works. And if you don't need that, go right into your heart. You'll remember these images for a long time. Because if one of us can do it, it's available to everyone. And the bottom line is, we're living at a pivotal point in human history and civilization. We've got to think about ourselves differently, live differently, and act differently. And that difference is in us recognize that we are part of, rather than separate from, all that we see. And that a little change in one of us creates a big change in the world around us. To feel the feeling, this is the language this field that recognizes. To feel as if that peace is already there when you're watching the Fair and Balanced News at 6 o'clock at night. It tells you what a scary world it is. To feel that feeling as if the peace has already happened, as if the healing has already occurred, or if your perfect relationship is already here now. And you're going to see precisely the instructions of how it works. If you're not, it's all in the book. It's documented on the website. And you've seen enough here today. You've got everything you know to take this home and live it in your lives right now. I think we agreed to close 1 minute ago. So we went over for 1 minute. I want to thank you all for our time together today. Thank you.
For another amazing Gregg Braden video, check it out right there next to me. I think you'll love it. Continue to believe, and I'll see you there.
But we influence the healing of our bodies, the peace between nations, the abundance, our spiritual abundance, our material abundance, the quality of our relationships, our romance, our friendships, the success of our careers.